Around in Canada's elections as Mark Carney and the Liberal Party secure a surprising victory. In his victory speech, Carney slammed President Trump, declaring Trump is trying to break us. But that will never happen. Carney, now Canada's Prime Minister, also warned that the old relationship with the United States is over and pledged to build an independent future for Canada. Let's listen in to what Carney's had to say. But the race well, in the latest federal election results in Canada, the Liberal Party, led by Mark Carney, emerged victorious. They secured 168 out of the 343 seats. The Conservative Party followed closely, winning 144 seats. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte expressed his eagerness to strengthen the alliance with Canada under Prime Minister Carney's leadership. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron congratulated Carney, highlighting his embodiment of a strong Canada. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also extended his congratulations, expressing hope for deeper ties between Canada and Ukraine. Additionally, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Carney, suggesting the potential for a fresh chapter in Canada-India relations. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese praised his Commonwealth partner, saying, "In these times of global uncertainty, I look forward to continuing our work together to strengthen the enduring friendship between us." Well, joining us to discuss all of the developments from this Canada election, this historic Canada election. First is Gautam Mukherjee, a senior journalist joining us from New Delhi. Gautam, thank you ever so much for being here with us. This is a comeback from the Liberal parties that, although polls predicted just months ago, seemed extremely unlikely. How did Mark Carney turn it around? Well, instead we are joined by Ross Feingold. I will pitch the same question to you, Ross. What was it that gave Mark Carney the impetus to turn this election result around?
Most analysts and observers feel it was a reaction to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's frequent statements about taking over Canada, or Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. President Trump, while Justin Trudeau was still the prime minister, frequently referred to him as governor on social media. So it seems that the Canadian electorate, by a small margin, not a very large margin, but by a small margin in the national vote, which is a different figure from the number of seats that each party wins. But it seems that on the national vote level, people wanted the experienced policymaker, which they're getting with Prime Minister Carney, given his experience at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So they wanted somebody with real policy background who could deal with international negotiations. And also, I think Poilievre probably hurt himself given the tensions between Trump and Canada, because earlier in the campaign, he came across as a bit similar to Trump. He talked about woke ideology. He talked about defunding public broadcasters because they were too biased towards the left. So some of his statements came across as too Trumpy, and it was enough to hurt him with the vote a few hours ago.
Yes, Ross, of course, there's not just the Liberal Party in this election, but the front runner alongside them were the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre not just lost the election, but looks set to lose his seat. What's the significance of this development?
The big question at the moment is whether he's going to seek to remain as Conservative Party leader, and if so, does he plan to lead the party into the next election years from now? It's extremely unusual for a party leader who loses their seat in Parliament to remain as the party leader. But from his remarks, he made his remarks last night not knowing what the result of his own seat would be. But we now have that result, and it will be very interesting to watch in the coming hours and the coming weeks whether he continues or he seeks to continue to be party leader, or there's going to be challengers. Normally speaking, you would expect the party leader to be somebody who has a seat in Parliament.
Yes, Ross, and looking now forwards, of course, we know that Mark Carney will be the Prime Minister of Canada for the coming years. Of course, tensions with the United States reigning strong during this election campaign. How do you think Carney's stance during campaigning will impact relations with the US moving forward?
They're going to have to enter into negotiations, just like other major trading partners or even smaller trading partners of the United States are trying to enter in negotiations to stave off those reciprocal tariffs that President Trump has threatened to impose. So the two leaders are going to have to talk, President Trump and Prime Minister Carney. They're going to have to meet. Meetings between the U.S. President and the Prime Minister of Canada are fairly routine and usually happen several times a year. And they're going to have to negotiate. And President Trump will have to accept the reality that this man is the Prime Minister of Canada. And Carney's going to have to accept the reality that Trump is a tough negotiator on behalf of the United States. And they're going to have to take it from there. I would expect, just as with other major trading partners, that there is a deal to be reached.
Yes, Ross, very quickly before we end our discussion, we have, of course, spoken about the outcry of support for Carney and commendation from other world leaders. Of course, Canada's position sitting in discussions on the Russia-Ukraine war, also negotiations with China and tensions with China over trade separate to those tariff trade tensions with Donald Trump. How important is it that Carney tackles the geopolitical situation and uncertainty head on?
That's a really interesting question, because I think coming out of this election, the voters, the public in Canada, are expecting him to tackle domestic issues, and they have in Canada what is usually called an affordability crisis. The cost of housing, the cost of food, and other daily necessities has gone up tremendously in the past 5 years. There's concerns about too much immigration in recent years into Canada, and it's time to slow that pace down. So I think the voters who've put him back in office are really looking at him to tackle domestic issues. But as you said, he will be forced to deal with a lot of international issues as well.
Ross Feingold, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us there. We do now move on and bring you some breaking news, and an explosion has rocked a gunpowder and